An episode that brings to light the fact that we can look at reality and get different opinions, different conflicting opinions about what really went on, is a happening that took place about 100 years ago out west. Winter, 30 inches of snow, 20 degrees below zero, to a homestead. A wife and a 6-year-old boy, one-room log cabin, and the woman was pregnant, very pregnant. She went into labor, and the husband starts to make his way to the faraway town. Luckily, the physician was making his monthly rounds and happened upon the scene after the husband left. He looks at the woman in labor, at the child, and at the snow. Well, the natural thing to do, of course, he leaves the child inside, and he does. Delivery takes place in the only bed available, and a boy is born. However, the boy is limp. He's not breathing. He's not doing anything. So the doctor grabs the baby and shakes the baby, and nothing happens. Doctor shakes the baby and spanks the baby, and nothing happens. Shakes the baby some more, spanks the baby again and again. And after repeated stimulation, finally the baby goes, "Whoa!" They give a sigh of relief and gives the baby to the mother. Now he looks at Junior, who has been looking at all this with his eyes wide open. He says, "Well, I have to explain things to Junior." So the doctor looks at the 6-year-old boy and says, "Well, son, what do you think of all this?" And the little boy looks at the doctor and says, "After that spanking, I bet he's never going to crawl up there again." I think that that's exactly what is happening with the legislative gains of what I term the forces of death in our society. Definition of death has had a historical development according to the knowledge of the time. We were dead without breathing, and respiratory death. Then we found out that we were resuscitating people that had drowned. We came to the conclusion that you were dead when your heart stopped. However, using adrenaline and defibrillators, we've made hearts beat again. And now we're at the concept that you're really dead when your brain is not functioning. The big problem is that death is a process. Strict legal definition may hasten yours. If we had defined death 70 years ago, we could have written a statute saying anybody who's not breathing is dead. So why meddle with a corpse right out of the lake? Don't try to resuscitate that. Living wills are nothing but death warrants. It says that one of the things that they say is that they don't want artificial means to keep you alive. I am kept alive every day by an artificial means of life support. They're called my glasses. And without these, I would be hit in the first street that I cross. So anything can be interpreted as an artificial means. You know, Campbell's soup heated in an electric oven. How artificial can you get? No. Well, no heroic measures. You know, these have no meaning in medicine. As a different variety, you may have a committee deciding on you. It may make a simple illness into a major catastrophe. You set up 1 to 4 agents to be called when you are, quote, termed by the attending physician, who might be anybody, saying that you are temporarily unable, or you are, quote, unable to make a decision. We can't treat you. We would have to call your agent. By the time we get your agent, you might be dead. The other situation is that suppose the agent doesn't want you to be treated. You know, you had an auto accident. There's nothing really wrong, but you're just nervous and shook up, and it is evident to the state physician or the attending physician that you're unable to make a decision. Sure, we'll be at the mercy of whichever physician or agent you may have. My question is, where did your agent get the medical education necessary to determine what treatment is best for you? It's irrevocable. It says, well, you can revocate it by destroying it. Suppose you're paralyzed. It says, well, you can make an oral revocation in front of 2 witnesses. But your agent only has to pay attention to it when he has, quote, actual knowledge of the revocation. Suppose 2 gentlemen come and say, "Mr. Agent, you're out of business. The patient just told us that he doesn't want to vow by your decision." He can say, "Well, that is not, quote, actual knowledge," and we can go to court testifying to that effect. Allowing physicians to end their life is Hitler's approach. All that Hitler did was write a little letter to Karl Brandt, his personal physician, saying mercy death could be granted to all those individuals who, to the best human knowledge, are incurably ill. Interestingly enough, we are all incurable. See, our incurable condition is called life. It always ends in death. And that's exactly what happened there. They included anybody and everybody they wanted. Prenatal euthanasia is abortion. Better dead than unwanted. A life not worth living. The same idea. I had a patient by the name of Janet, 23 years old, had a head-on accident in Cleveland. She was brought to the emergency room unconscious with about 7 or 8 fractures. She aspirated a tooth, and she had internal bleeding. We operated, removed a ruptured spleen. We set the fractures. 8 hours later, we finally got a hold of the mother. The mother came to the intensive care unit and told me, "My husband died in a respirator. I want my daughter off the respirator now." I said, "Ma'am, it's good for her. and she stormed out. Janet eventually took a whole year, but she recovered and returned to her previous occupation as appraiser of automobile accidents for an insurance company. What we're seeing here is the wedge approach. Abortion was first advocated for the unusual case. Now we have abortion on demand. Euthanasia first proposed for the unusual case by the indirect and voluntary method. Once we accept the fact that you have to have an agent, the government or anybody can come in and say, well, let's be the agents for the retarded. And they obviously don't want to be kept alive under those circumstances, which is what the Karen Quinlan decision said. If Karen for a moment could miraculously see the condition that she's at, she would rather be dead. And the important thing is that if we recognize that Karen is better off dead, then what are we going to do with those retarded that are in a similar situation? Do we want that for them too? That's what happened in Germany, the snowball effect. In Nazi Germany, was first employed for the severely retarded and helplessly ill, then for the insane, the criminal, the elderly, and finally the racially unwanted. Physician is no longer independent. I would call social medicine or social surgery, medicine or surgery that is not medically indicated, but it's imposed from the outside. Social medicine at the request of the state. Sterilization and abortion programs, elimination of useless eaters, economical medical care. Here we have the cue. One of the large medical groups that has people in Washington that are just listening to what kind of legal medical problems are taking place in Washington, and they're very attuned to national health insurance and that kind of business. And one of the problems is that health, education, and welfare is looking into the cost of medical care. And one of the things that they said at the end of 1977, a high member of HEW, is that the federal government should withhold health funds from those states that do not have viable living will legislation, death with dignity legislation, of course. Because once you accept that there'll be situations A, B, or C in which you'd rather be dead, you can look around and see how many elderly patients and patients in mental institutions are in situations A, B, or C, that if you want that mercy for yourself, maybe you ought to give it to them and save a lot of money. What physicians ought to do, and society as a whole, is practice a healing ministry where we would get all people of all ages and conditions to attain their fullness of life, which is their due.